Hello there, and welcome to the Get French Football News preview show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Adam White and Jeremy Smith. We are skipping the news tonight because there's not really much to tell, so we're going to jump straight into things. But do remember, for all your latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We're starting this evening with a look down a division, really, into Ligue 2, because we've not had a look sort of for the entire season of really what might be coming up this way, what players are impressing and could be Ligue 1 starlets next season. But starting with the somewhat runaway league leaders, and that's your team, Jez, in Metz, who've had a solid bounce back campaign after the relegation last season. They did finish this Ligue 1 season relatively okay, but obviously have ended up finishing bottom. But it looks like yet again they may be coming back straight back up. Has it been a season of positives, or is there a worry that they're not quite strong enough to maintain Ligue 1 status should they get that next season?
Can I say both? I mean, you look at the position we're in, and one of the top scoring teams in the division, one of the best defensive teams in the division, reasonably comfortable. I think we need 4 more wins to be sure of being promoted, and particularly if we win this weekend over Lorient, who are currently in third, that would be a huge step towards assuring promotion. And it's hard to quibble, but at the same time, we have looked like a very good Ligue 2 team, but there have been reasonably long periods where we haven't been playing great football, and we've possibly a few results that even have been a little bit flattering for us. And I saw an S fan recently refer to us as a League 1.5 team, which I think is quite a good description. I think over the last 10 years, we've only once have we been in the same division for 2 consecutive seasons, which it's crazy what a yo-yo club we've become. At one point, you can go into the National, but generally it's between Ligue 1 and Ligue 2, and it does feel like we're sort of, for the most part, too good for Ligue 2, but never quite good enough for Ligue 1. So I expect that we'll go up, but I would hope that we make a few changes in order to have a chance of staying up. And possibly the most important thing, apart from player recruitment, is whether Frédéric Antonetti comes back as well. He's been given a sort of indeterminate leave of absence to care for his wife, who's very unwell. Vincent Agnon has been sort of holding the fort and has done, I think, surprisingly well, considering that he came from Messi's biggest rivals, where he sort of came to Metz as a bit of a hero because he had such a terrible time at Nancy, and it looked like he was going to condemn them to relegation. But at the same time, we were a little bit worried that, having come off such a bad time at Nancy, was he going to be able to sort of continue what Antonetti's been doing? And as I said, the football hasn't necessarily been as good as at the start of the season, but he has managed to maintain the results. He has managed to make us, to ensure that we still remain hard to beat even when we're not playing well. So I suppose, again, it's a similar kind of thing. He's good enough to take us out of Ligue 2, but I certainly don't think that he's good enough to lead us into Ligue 1, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when we know how good Antonetti is at keeping teams in Ligue 1, at least for a short period of time, at least anyway. In terms of other teams in and around there, Adam, because I know you get the chance to watch a lot of Ligue 2 football now, around the top we'll start with, and there's a few teams that will be vying for not just promotion, but the promotion. Well, it's the promotion relegation playoff place as well. We've got Stade Brestois currently in second on 55. They're 6 points behind Metz, but 5 points ahead of Lorient, like Jess said, who are currently in that playoff place. But just below them on the same points is Paris FC, who've really impressed this season, and some more more recognisable names in Lens and Troyes, only a couple of points behind them. Who do you see sort of finishing in those other places? Because it's almost a given you'd think that Metz will at least be occupying at the very minimum third. But who else do you see challenging to go up with them?
Yeah, I think you're right. Metz are pretty much home and dry. They've been pretty solid over the course of the season. I agree with Jez that they're sort of a League 1.5 team is a good way to describe it. I think Brest are pretty much there too. They're obviously a little bit less safe than Metz, but top scorer in our old friend Gaëtan Charbonnier, who's been around Ligue and was never a prolific goal scorer, but he's got 20 goals in Ligue 2 this season. I remember him at Reims and at Angers and perhaps one or two others, and was never really prolific, but seemed to have found his level. I think that they're easily well equipped to finish in that second place. The gap is sort of closed a little bit, but I think they're pretty confident of finishing at least second. They've got a number of sort of old Ligue and kind of stalwarts, Anthony Weber from Reims as well, Jesse P, who's been around, Thomas Ayas, who's been around as well. Matthias Soltret has been up and down the season. He's a good attacking midfielder. So I think they're there. Lorient are an interesting example of a team chasing the top two. I would be worried if they got promoted. I sort of enjoyed following Lorient in Ligue 1, but I don't know if they've got the firepower at the moment to maintain a Ligue 1 kind of place. Like the team that got relegated isn't actually too dissimilar to the one that's playing that they've got at the moment. Vincent Lagos still there doing really well. Fabien Lemoine is obviously a player of Ligue 1 experience, and I would argue of Ligue 1 quality. He's been absolutely brilliant for them this season. Jimmy Cabot as well on his day is absolutely fantastic, but perhaps not quite at Ligue 1 level, even though he had his moments in Ligue 1. I remember him scoring a hat-trick against Troyes, which is absolutely fantastic, but he doesn't do that every week. And there are a few players that have sort of broken through that were in and around the team before they got relegated, like Alexis Claude-Maurice and Pierre-Yves Hamel. They've become important players for them. Younger players coming through, but whether they're of Ligue 1 quality yet, I don't know. But I would still fancy him to finish in the top five, so that the next, obviously, the third, fourth, and fifth will playoff places. And I really think that those three places are between four teams. So the next three, Paris, Lens, and Troyes. I think you're looking at three of those four finishing in the playoffs. Orléans have hit a good run of form, and they're 2 points back, and perhaps it's not right to rule them out, but I don't think they've got the quality to maintain it during the last nine games. And there was a group just behind there, but they've sort of dropped away, like Le Havre, who's been really poor recently. Even Auxerre looked like they might make a challenge at one point, and they won 3 or 4 games in a row after Christmas and looked decent, but they've been terrible and sacked former Nancy manager Paulo Carrera recently. So they've fallen out of sort of contention. Clermont are in around there as well, but again, I don't know, even though they've got 17 goals from Florian I, who's been very good this season, I don't think they've got the quality to maintain it. So it's another sort of three of those last two that I haven't mentioned yet. So Paris FC are perhaps my favourite team in the division. They're unbelievably defensive and unbelievably solid defensively, but they're very well organised and very. They've got a lot of good, technically good players. Perhaps listeners who are sort of a fan of wider European football, remember Jonathan Petroipa, who was at Hamburg and around the Bundesliga and sort of rocked up in Belgium and has turned up at Paris FC, and he stands out in every game for them. He looks fantastic in attacking midfield. And a player that I would really look out for in their team is Romain Perrault, is on loan from Nice at left back, and he's been absolutely fantastic this season. Even though he's left back, he was actually their top scorer at one point this year with 4 goals. So it shows how sort of thriftful they are in front of goal, but they very rarely concede, and they've got apart from actually no, they actually do have the best defense in the record, defense record in the league. Metz have conceded 18 and Paris conceded 16, so they're a really good side, and I would back them to be decent in Ligue 1 with the squad they've got at the moment, although it might need to be expanded a little bit. And Lens have been a little bit up and down of late, but I would fancy them over Troyes to finish in the top 5, which obviously, as everyone who follows French football knows, they're extremely difficult to beat at home. Really, really good support. Getting easily the biggest crowds in the division, sometimes up there with Metz as well. And if you look over the course of the weekend, they often sort of sneak into the top 5 or 6. tendencies in France. You know, they're a side that really should be in Ligue 1, and they've got players like Guillaume Gillet, who's been injured for a long stretch of the season, but obviously a quality player despite being 35. International experience was great at Nantes. Walid Mesloub was very good at in spells. You know, he's definitely got quality, but he's aging a little bit, but still perhaps can do a job at this level. Stephen Fortas signed from Toulouse recently, and he's started quite well in defence. So I think they're a decent shout, but again, they would need to expand quite a bit on their squad if they were to get promoted. But I think those three in the playoffs, Troyes have been in good form, but perhaps aren't quite as good as those other three teams. So I would think Paris FC would win the playoffs, perhaps, depending who they came up against in Ligue. But Brest and Metz to get promoted for sure.
Absolutely, and sticking quickly with sort of the higher points of the table, I suppose we've mentioned a few players that have really starred this season already. I know we're well versed in what Charbonnier can really bring into Ligue 1, so it's unlikely maybe that he'd make a splash upon any kind of return. But is there any other standout performers in Ligue 2 that we could maybe be seeing in Ligue 1 and making a real splash? Because we've seen in the past a number of players not just go to Ligue 1, but even to the Premier League and perform at a very high level.
Yeah, there's definitely it's classic sort of Ligue 2. They're sort of littered with young players sort of breaking through, and there's some real quality in places. It's very uneven, the league. There's a few areas where there isn't the quality falls away. But I think one of the most interesting sides for that is sort of Le Havre. They famous for developing young players. There's a young defender called Harold Mokoudi who's actually been exiled from the first 11, who was sort of being linked with. He's a 20-year-old centre defender who's been linked with Ligue 1 clubs, and he was fantastic in the first half of the year, but fell out with the hierarchy, and he's been exiled from the team, very likely to move to a Ligue 1 club in the summer.
I think he was quite close to joining Aston Villa last summer.
Yeah. Yeah, there were quite a few. I think there were a few championship teams that were looking around him, and he's a good player. So it'd be great to keep him in France. Zinedine Ferhat as well is a sort of a wide sort of playmaker, Algerian player. He's very skillful, very good on the ball. It'd be good to see him in Ligue in a very similar position in Le Havre. I think we've already talked a bit about Paris FC, but they've got a couple of interesting young players breaking through as well. I'm very difficult pronouncing this guy's surname, so I was calling him Silas because that's his first name. That's what I always call him. But he's a 20-year-old striker. He's really developed into a very important player for them in the second half of the season. Very quick, decent finisher, and would suit a number of Ligue 1 clubs really well, perhaps even further afield. So it's a division that it's got a lot of exciting young players who develop quickly. They find their way into the team pretty sharpish and are off. But it's good to see them develop. And there's aside from the ones I've mentioned, there's a number of very good young players.
Yeah, Silas Wamangituke is about how I'm reading that, but I've probably butchered that, so I do apologise to Mr. Silas if he is listening. Just very quickly then, Adam, sort of before we move on to the Ligue 1 weekend ahead, looking sort of at the bottom of the table, I know a lot of listeners might be looking at the Ligue table as they're listening to this and thinking about the teams that are there, because we've mentioned a few famous ones. Auxerre were a Champions League club in recent enough memory, but there's a couple of Ligue 1 sides fighting out near the bottom. I can see Sochaux in the relegation playoff zone at the moment, and Nancy only a couple of points above them as well. What's happened to these two clubs? I mean, Sochaux, I'm thinking about 10 years ago, where we're in European football, albeit UEFA Cup action, and Nancy were obviously a Ligue 1 side pretty recently in terms of actually being last season. Really, they've both sort of fallen off a cliff. Yeah,
they really have. I think Sochaux are the classic example of a team that have fallen off the cliff. They just don't have the quality. They've been around the bottom third for some time now, and Omar Daf of Senegal fame from the 2002 World Cup is actually their manager. And they've really struggled to sort of maintain any sort of form over years. Really, it's sort of been an endemic thing. And I think this season might be the year they finally drop into the relegation playoff. They're a bit of a Ligue de Hamburg. They're sort of just about surviving, but they might sort of start slipping away relatively soon. Players like Johan Mollo are there now. Got a couple of good young players. Lucien Ogum, who's come through recently, is a 17-year-old. He's an exciting player, but I don't think they've got the quality overall. Nancy, I think, will be okay. They're like Ligue does Monaco. They were terrible for the first half of the year. They've got Alan Perrin in charge of Portsmouth fame, and has obviously been around France for a long time. And they were abject for long stretches, but they signed loads of players in the January transfer window. A lot of players from Ligue 1, and Saint-Etienne came in from Nantes. He's been really good, scored a number of goals. Wagner, who is a Portuguese, Cape Verdean winger at Saint-Etienne, who had a few glimpses in the first half of last season in the team. He's been absolutely fantastic for them, and has really sort of dragged them out of the mire. They won 4 games in a row with sort of the number of these sort of 5 or 6 new players they brought in who'd been around sort of Ligue and Ligue 2 for some time. So I think they'll be okay. But then I think Béziers and Red Star are in the same way that Metz look like a Ligue 2 side. They look like national teams, and I think that they'll probably. Although Béziers got I think the question is it was their first home win last week, so that shows that they're very they lack goals and lack penetration. But so I think they're going to go, and I think. Châteauroux, Gazalec, Châteauroux might start slipping down there, but I think Sochaux are really in trouble, and Nancy have got the quality now to stay out of trouble. So perhaps we might see Sochaux in National. I don't think they'd lose the relegation playoff, but they could well be in it.
Absolutely. I've got a small soft spot for Sochaux after, I think it was a 2009 football manager career on them with Riyad Boudibou's in the squad. I had Jerome Roussillon. There's a few good players come through that sort of system that have gone on to have great success.
Menes.
Yeah. They've brought. It's surprising to think how quickly they've dropped. I mean, the Cedric Bakambu was there at some point as well. A number of good players come through that system even recently, and it's a surprise that they have fallen so far.
I think that a lot of their fans, I think, reserve sort of quite a lot of their anger for the Chinese owners. I don't think they've made any friends since they've been there.
It doesn't surprise me, to be fair, with what's happened with foreign owners in Ligue, full stop, really. But on we move really to back to Ligue 1 action, because there's some interesting games as well as a cup final that we spoke about on Monday. But we'll do some predictions at the end. But we're going to start with Friday's game, which is probably really the most competitive one of the weekend, Jez, because it's between Rennes and Lyon, and Lyon coming back to league action now after the international break, which went relatively well for some of their players. We know Memphis Depay had a very, very successful break, really, but a good win against Montpellier, lost time out. But a lot of the talk about Lyon at the moment isn't things on the field, really, because while they've been gone, there's been a lot of the talk about what quote unquote is the decision, although it may not be watched as much as LeBron's was a few years ago, really. but Jean-Michel Aulas is treating it with as much glamour nonetheless, and even rumours that Jose Mourinho might be in the wings and that he might be finally willing, as he puts it at least anyway, to put up the money to bring him in. Does that managerial uncertainty bring some question marks? Because there's even rumours coming from today that they're pretty much ready to give Genesi a new contract as well.
I'm always surprised that this kind of thing affects players, but it generally does, especially if people know that the coach is kind of not a sitting duck, but they know that he's going to leave at the end of the season. It affects form, and I'm always disappointed when it does, because they're professional players, and you think that once they get out onto the pitch, that kind of thing shouldn't make a difference, but it does generally seem to. And I mean, Aulas is such a canny operator that you're sort of tempted to think he must have some kind of, I don't know, clever plan for why he's decided that he's going to announce the decision about the coach when he is. But to me, it's completely mystifying. It's between 2 tough matches against Rennes, the second of which is the Coupe de France semi-final, which really is a good chance for PSG for Lyon to get some silverware, and it just whether Genesio stays or goes, it just seems very disruptive. I can only think, and like you said, that Le Parisien today were saying that he is set to get an extension. I can only think that must be the case, because if he's going to extend it and confirm that Genesio is staying, then maybe it's a little bit of fuss over nothing and everything carries on as normal after Monday's announcement. But if he's going to leave, then it just makes absolutely no sense to announce it at such a crucial time of Lyon's season. The Parisien article made a fuss about how he is sort of liked within the club. I'm sure that however strongly Olas feels about him, if the players really did have issues with Genesio, I think that their sort of influence would speak, and he wouldn't stay. So I suppose you have to take it at its word that he is respected there. But then at the same time, that being the case, why did Olas agree to listen to the fans' opinions, knowing full well, as everyone does, that a lot of the Lyon fans do not rate Genesio at all and really want him to leave? That bit doesn't make sense either. Why say, yeah, I'm gonna meet with the bad gun, who are the main sort of Lyon fan group, and kind of really take account of what they want when I make my decision. If he knows that he's going to keep him on, all that's going to do is antagonise his own fans. So I don't understand what Olas is doing in general. Like I said, I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's been proved right more than wrong over the last 20 or so years. But it does seem a bit strange. But for me, whatever happens, I really, really hope that Mourinho doesn't go near Ligue 1. I can't bear him. I think he's a really nasty piece of work. As a Man United fan, I'm assuming that you don't have a particularly high opinion of him either right now. I think the kind of soap opera that PSG give us is fine to be getting on with, and I wouldn't particularly relish having to talk about Mourinho's latest kind of attention-seeking shenanigans week in, week out in Ligue 1 as well.
Yeah, it's something more. It's a catch-22 we kind of want to avoid, but it does give us topics when we go quiet, at least anyway. On to their opponents really in Rennes. Adam, I think the best question to ask you on this one really is they're now out of the Europa League after losing 3-0 to Arsenal, and they were a bit indifferent in that game, and they got the draw against Bordeaux. They sit in 8th, but they've got 2 games against Lyon coming up, as Jez mentioned, the cup final in Lyon, the cup semi-final, in Lyon in midweek, but obviously play at home in this one. Which game is more important to Rennes now? Do they want to go all out and try and push themselves back in the argument for Europe in the league, or do you think that the cup success is maybe their highest priority at this moment in time?
Well, I guess that's an interesting question, because I guess if both lead to the same result, except one comes with a trophy. So, if they were to win the cup, they would get into Europe. And if they were to finish in the top 5, you would imagine, I don't think it'd be 6 because I imagine Strasbourg or, obviously Gamble win the Coupe de Ligue, which means there won't be a top 6 like there have been in the last few seasons because PSG have won them both. That they also get into Europe. But so obviously if they had their choice, they'd win the cup and get into Europe. But the likelihood of that happening, them winning away at Lyon and then beating PSG in the final, I imagine Ben Arfa, if that happened, would be in his element. But I don't see it happening. So, but then they're not a club that are going to sort of bypass the cup to focus on the league, given they've got an opportunity to win a trophy. It's not too unlikely. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that they could win the cup. And they're a big team, and they're a type of team that would be aspiring to win trophies. So I think that it's obviously just one game. It's not like a Europa League group stage where there might need to be some sort of process of prioritization between the league and the Europa League. That they can focus on both of these games as much as they can after this international break. They didn't have too many international leavers, so they'll be relatively fresh, and they should be able to go into this week all guns blazing and give it their best shot in both fixtures. And if they get to the final, then then that's fantastic. If they don't, then they can kind of switch back their focus towards the league. And even if they lose this game to Lyon, they're still very much in with a shout. I mean, it'd be pretty bad if they did lose given the gap, but not overly disastrous. So I would say prioritize both this week. Go for it, and because these kind of opportunities, cup semi-finals in a relatively winnable game, I suppose, given that it's the stage of the competition and Lyon's season so far, it don't come around too often. So for Rennes, so go for it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing sometimes we say about this, but are they just fodder for PSG to win in the final, as it has been in a lot of competition? So we'll wait and see. Although Lyon are a bit of their kryptonite, really. So there's a chance that they I don't want to say fully that they're good at that, because they have faced a lot of not Lyon in the cup finals recently. Let's get predictions then, and I'll start with you on this one, Jez. What do you think the score will be?
I'm finding this one really hard to call. I think it's been confirmed tonight that three of Rennes, I think, quite important players. Traore, who I think has been really underrated this year, Bourigeaud and Bensebaini are out, which I think is a bit of a blow for them. I think if they'd been full strength, I'd have backed them to sneak a win. I'm going to go, I think 1-1. I think it'll be a draw. I think Lyon should be pretty happy to come away with a draw.
Adam?
Yeah, I agree with Jez. I think those three players would be big misses. So I'm going to go 2-1 Lyon.
I'm going to agree with Jez. It feels like a 1-1 draw, just because the distractions off the field for Lyon as well. And also, just adding to that, I think the fact that Marseille have sort of sat off them a little bit now with the loss to Paris Saint-Germain last time out. They've got a bit of breathing room there now as well. So it's not exactly the end of the world if you're drawing away at Rennes. On to the team I've just mentioned there, really, is Marseille facing Angers at the weekend. That'll be the only game really on Saturday, after a couple of fixtures have moved around, a couple to Sunday, and Saint-Etienne, Nîmes, which we'll come on to later, has moved to Monday night. An interesting one on this one, Jez, especially for the home side. Like I mentioned, they lost Le Classique, and again, rumours start swirling in the media about potential people leaving in the summer. That a couple of names really that we sort of expected wanting to leave, but also at the same time a lot of big names, Paye, Rami, even Tovan or Gustavo, may be sold in the summer to try and inject some cash, really, maybe the best way to put it. It's looking more and more like it's going to be even more of an uncertain summer for Marseille than we maybe even anticipated 2, maybe even 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that there's going to be a big overhaul in the summer. It's been quite obvious that that's been needed for a while anyway, but Errol has pretty much come out and said it this week. And I guess again that it could go either way for the rest of the season. Either certain players who know they're on their way out are going to be unmotivated, or people are going to be playing either for their places, either to stay at Marseille, or at least to make themselves a little more attractive to other teams who may be coming in. So you'd hope that from a Marseille point of view, it could be a good thing. But as we've discussed, I think, several times before, there are a few players there who either don't look good enough for a club like Marseille, or just don't look good enough anymore. Clearly have been good players in the past, but look well past their best. So I definitely think there's a big need for renewal there. And then in terms of this match, it's the usual thing with Marseille, that it's a little bit difficult to read exactly where they are. They had such a good run leading up to the PSG match, and then there's obviously no shame in losing 3-1 away to PSG, particularly after being reduced to 10 men. The Marseille fans, I think, did come away pretty disappointed that they didn't even put up any kind of fight. It was that very short period at the beginning of the second half where they pulled level again, more through, I think, PSG mistake than Marseille sort of slicing them open. But the result never really felt in any kind of doubt at any point during the match, and I think that was the frustration for the Marseille fans. So this is, at home, Angers always a tough prospect, but at home you'd expect Marseille to be able to bounce back. It's the usual thing with them that I think they need to bounce back in order to be a sort of springboard for the end of the season, and for them to be able to just see the PSG match as a unfortunate blip. Another poor result against Angers though, and then it'll be back to sort of Marseille in crisis, and then it becomes harder for them again to turn it around. But there is still that incentive of second place rather. Third place. as we've just said, it's not inconceivable that Lyon could lose this weekend, and they do have a couple more tough matches to come as well. So Marseille really do have a good incentive to remain 100% motivated, both from a sort of personal point of view in terms of where players are going to end up during the summer, but also as a club. It's Lyon, I think, are still clear favourites, but Marseille really could still give them a run for their money if they're really up for it.
And that's the interesting thing about this game. I think that on Adam, that Angers have been in pretty decent form. They had a bit of a blip last time out, but at the same time, they like being disruptors. Really, it's one of their favourite things to do, especially when they're on this sort of second half of season high as they have been in the last few weeks. Yes, they got the sort of it's been 3 draws in a row really against a tough Monaco side at the moment. Montpellier are always difficult away from home, and against Amiens, who are rising, but it wouldn't bet against them to make it a 4th draw out of a row for them either.
No, that'd be classic Angers, wouldn't it? To sort of they tend to play to their sort of opponent's level almost. They struggle against the weaker teams, and they do okay against the bigger teams and get decent results against them. They've been to Marseille before and caused them issues. So yeah, I think that they have a decent shot at a draw here. The only thing that I would say is that, given the way that their season has panned out, and you mentioned their form has been solid, and they've really extricated themselves from relegation trouble. And they're in 12th and 36 points, 14 points clear of the bottom 3. They're no way in trouble. They're pretty much already safe, really. Even if they lost every other game, they might be safe. To be honest, 36 points probably just about does you. And they're 11 points, or 10 points off the top 6, and they haven't got the quality to overcome all those teams between them and 5th. So their season's almost already over, because they're not going to threaten either end of those. So unless you're sort of thinking players playing for contracts, players playing for places, or for moves, or the club playing for prize money in the league, that they're sort of edging towards the beach, if you like, which is a shame, because they are sort of usurpers. They're sort of they do tend to cause people issues and surprises. But I think that although they might on the face of it have a good shout at a draw here, they might just sort of lack the intensity that they've shown in recent weeks. That Moulin is very good at getting out of his sides, and that might really count against them here. So I think they assuming they can maintain their desire over the course of the next few weeks, they'll continue to improve, and it'd be great to see them finish in the top half, because I don't think they finished 9th the season they got promoted. I think they finished in the bottom half the last 2 years. So it'd be great to see them finish in the top half. That's a worthy goal. But I think given the injection of youth at Marseille, and Boubacar Kamara and Lopez and those sorts of players who are battling for top 3, I think that might be enough to swing it in Marseille's favour. So Angers always worth watching when they go to a big team, or especially when big teams come to them. But I think it sort of they're edging towards their summer holidays, maybe a little bit too much already.
Okay, and let's get some predictions on this one, Adam. I think you showed a little bit of your hand early on that one, but what do you think the score will be?
2-0 Marseille.
Jez?
I'm going to go the same margin, but maybe they'll get a bit of a scare along the way, so 3-1. So.
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw, I think. Angers like being spoilers, and Marseille never seem to bounce back completely after a poor result, so I think the draw might be on the cards. And an interesting game following it on Sunday that we're going to have a look at between Toulouse and Paris Saint-Germain. And for the away side, Jez, it's been a positive week, really, although there was a couple of pullouts for injury of international players. At the same time, there's Thomas Tuchel signing a new contract to confirm his residence of 2021, and the fact that Verratti had a good international break as well. Although there's rumours of Kylian Mbappe heading to Real Madrid, but I don't know if you've heard of anyone who's not been linked to Real Madrid since Zinedine Zidane has retaking charge. I think they could sign about 40 players if they needed to, from the sounds of things. But all a little bit hunky-dory at Paris Saint-Germain. But at the same time, is with the games that they've got left, the fact that they've almost they've all but in name got the title sealed up. Is their focus maybe on Wednesday's game against Nantes instead of this one?
It probably is, but the squad they've got, that there's more than enough room for them to be able to focus on both. It's this usual thing with PSG where they're in this kind of weird no man's land where, I mean, much like Adam said about Angers, but in a completely different way, it kind of feels that although they do have a trophy to play for and may yet be challenged by the likes of Rennes or Lyon, for example, basically their season is pretty much over because, as usual, it sort of boiled down to one match or one tie and they were found wanting again. So you'd expect them to get past Nantes, you'd expect them to get past Toulouse. They may well do it with a lot of style, similarly to the match against Dijon, which immediately followed that Man United defeat. But part of it still feels a little bit like, well, does it matter? They will win the league sooner or later, and it's as usual with them. It's just that frustration that great, you can do it against teams like that, but you didn't do it when you really should have done it when it really mattered. So you want to kind of try to find reasons to suggest that it's a particularly interesting match for them. Like I said about Marseille, can you say that any players are playing for their place in the team? Probably not. I mean, there's been rumours the last week or two that Dani Alves is going to be offered a new contract, that Buffon's going to be offered a new contract. I think that's a terrible sign, and to me that's still a case of Al-Khelaifi just looking after being starstruck and looking after his mates rather than really thinking about what's best for the team. It feels like PSG is not a particularly interesting subject anymore until the summer, and we start looking at possible transfers in or out. It's a frustration, and they may well play a fantastic match and come away from Toulouse with a 5-0 win or something. But like I said, the overwhelming feeling will still be, but you mucked it up when it counted.
Absolutely. That's yet again going to hang over the Parisians for the rest of the season, really. But as for Toulouse, Adam, is that a chance maybe with their eyes off the ball, a chance for them to take advantage? Because they have been a little bit better recently. I mean, they've only lost once in their last 4, and that was a pretty big hammer into Lyon. But they managed to get over the line against Guingamp. They got a plucky draw against Nice before the international break. They're pretty. You would say they're safe now, unless dramatically Guingamp started catching up the rest of the teams below them. But is there a possibility, without the pressure off in this one, that they can try and cause an upset?
I think they'll be hoping so, but I unfortunately I don't really see a route for them in this game to get anything out of it. I think Eric Devin, who's obviously a big part of the pod over the last few years, has said to me recently that he thinks that Toulouse are the worst team in the division without Max Gradel, and I would agree with that. I think Max Gradel has carried them this season completely, and last week at Nice when Christophe Harel kind of shut him down, they playing at fullback, and he was pretty anonymous. Toulouse are extremely lucky to get anything from that game. There's a late equaliser from Mubele off the bench, and so without Gradel, I really think that they'd be in trouble. I'd honestly think they'd probably be bottom if they weren't. They'd be in with Dijon and Caen anyway if they didn't have Gradel, almost at best. So I would say that although their results have been slightly better recently, and they haven't been quite as abject in the last month or so, that they look like a Ligue 2 side with a really good talisman who's kind of carrying them. So I would be amazed if they managed to cause PSG any issues here at all. And I think that, as we sort of mentioned before on the pod, the real worry for Toulouse is next season. What if Gradel, who will attract, he's 31, but some other sides, in some more expansive sides, some sides who can offer him more money, or who might be giving more sort of ambitions in the top half of the table, might look at him and he might be easily sort of poached. And I don't know where that would leave Toulouse, because I don't know how they go about replacing a player like Max Gradel. And although they've got other quality players, they've got one or two, like Ibrahim Sagari's good, but he's young and a bit raw. Jimmy Domaz isn't consistent enough. Manu Garcia is good, but it's on loan. I don't know if that'll last. Matthew Giuseppe was very good last season with Metz, but hasn't been great this season. So I think that I can't really see a route for them to take anything from PSG, given that since the Man United result, they've actually sort of just carried on regardless. And, when Di Maria in the form that he's in, who's probably my shout for player of the season at the moment in France, I don't see Toulouse causing them any issues, to be honest. And it's going to be a difficult summer for them.
It really, really is, to be fair. The predictions on results then, I'll start with yourself, Jess.
I think comfortable 3-0 for PSG.
Adam?
5, I think.
Yeah, I'll stick in the middle of those two and go for a 4-0 win. I can't see Toulouse getting anything out of it. I was more trying to give them some kind of optimism, but you don't really see it when they play, so I don't know why we should be giving them any here. On to the final game of the weekend, really, now at least, anyway, because it's moved on, and that's Saint-Etienne versus Nîmes, which will actually happen on Monday night now, given the movement from French football officials. And an interesting one, really, in a sense, because we were sort of cancelling Saint-Etienne out of a lot of things a couple of weeks ago, Jez, that they were sort of running out of steam. They struggled against Marseille and Lille and slowly slipped back to 6th. But a win against Caen and other results going their way, with Marseille dropping some points as well, it puts them in a real fight again for 4th position, which both there and 5th would be Europe, but it'd be even better if they can manage to overwhelm l'OM. And they don't have the hardest schedule left, really. They obviously got Nîmes this weekend and Amiens, Bordeaux, and then games against Reims and Monaco and Montpellier might be tough. But Toulouse, Nice, and Angers still in that section as well. There's every chance that Lever not only can get Europe, but if Lyon starts slipping up in this later stage, maybe with the cup, if they get through in that semi-final, that maybe they could be the late runners for the Champions League as well.
Yeah, I feel a little bit sorry for Saint-Etienne. They've had that kind of patchy run recently, but they've been victims of a couple of very late defeats against Lyon and Lille, for example. There was even the 3-0 against Rennes was extremely flattering to Rennes, I think. So I think they haven't been playing badly, but they haven't necessarily been getting the results that possibly they deserve. Only the Marseille match was the one where they sort of really didn't turn up at all. Even PSG, they gave them a good game as well. And all that with 2 first-team regulars being ruled out for the rest of the season with serious injuries, and Gabriel Silva and Monet Paquet. So I think that, as you'd expect from a Gasset team, they're always hard to beat. The last match, the 5-0 win at Caen, again, Caen being so bad, it's difficult to read too much into it. But I think the fact that the goals were shared around and a couple of the sort of talented youngsters got on the score sheet as well, it sort of bodes well for the maybe the not quite strength in depth, but certainly that there's a little bit more there than just the usual first teamers, and hopefully it sort of brings good spirit to the team as well. So yeah, I think they're well set to finish the season strongly, and I guess that in the same way as Marseille, just to be on Lyon's shoulder and just kind of saying, if you slip up at all, we're ready to take advantage. I think maybe it's a little bit too much for them to get that 3rd place, but I think they've had if you can say that, a sort of underrated season. I think they've gone a little bit under the radar because PSG, Lyon. Lille had such an amazing season. Marseille are always going to get a lot of headlines, but I think Saint-Etienne, just on the quiet, I think probably surpassed most people's expectations, and I think it would be hugely deserved, even if they miss out on that Champions League place. I think it would be massively deserved if they were to secure a Europa League spot.
And it'd be great if they can. Like you say, they've had a couple of hardships this season that have knocked them down a couple of times, and not so much for Nîmes. Adam, who've had a really great season. I know we've not really spoken as much about them in the second half, which is a bit of a disservice given how good they had been. But it has been a little bit of a topsy-turvy affair, shall we say. They were up in 6th back in January when they beat Nantes, but they dipped all the way to 11th before the victory against Nantes, and the double win got them back into sort of a comfortable mid-table spot. They'll be really happy with how their season has gone. They've scored plenty of goals. They've had a lot of entertainment. They've got players that, much like Ras, haven't quite, while they've kept them, haven't quite made the step up to Ligue 2, but it's from Ligue 2 to Ligue, but it's not really halted their stride at all. And while it's not exactly going to end in anything crazy like Ras might get in terms of Europe, but a comfortable mid-table slot is much more than Le Crocodile could have anticipated coming into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be great fun to be a Nîmes season ticket holder this year. Some of the results they've had, the 4-2 win at Nantes and the 3-1 win at home to Marseille, and the high scoring draws at Bordeaux, drawing at Monaco. They've had some really, really exciting games, and they play good football. They play attacking football, so they're always a good watch. And Bernard Blackard's done an incredible job, really, because although they've dropped into the bottom half and 11th at the moment, they deserve to be, based on their displays over the course of the year and the type of football that they play and the excitement that they've given. A top half finish would be very much deserved, and really show the progress they've made in the last sort of 6 months, having been promoted. And I think that we've probably talked about him a lot, but I think it's just worth noting the effect in a similar way to Max Gradel, but perhaps in a positive sense. And Teddy Savernier, their central midfielder, who for me, I've mentioned previously that Di Maria was my at the moment my sort of front runner for player of the season. Just behind him is Savernier. He's been absolutely amazing this season, and he's sort of a guy from Montpellier, from Nîmes, so hopefully they'll hold on to him over the summer. And I don't think he'd want to necessarily leave unless a really big offer came in. He still lives in the suburbs of Montpellier with his entire family, and is really hardworking, a really sort of family orientated guy, and has been around the area at Montpellier. He started in Arles, Avignon, and a few other of the teams around there. So I think he's a really interesting character, and if they can hold on to him, he's the real heart of their team. Then who knows, they could build on this next year. They made some astute signings in the summer and beyond. Jordan Ferry's a very good addition in this league, and Feitu Maras is a good little fullback in this league as well. So yeah, they're a brilliant, well-run club, brilliantly managed, with some really interesting, exciting players, and yeah, hopefully they can keep it up. They're a credit to Ligue 1.
Yeah, absolutely, and like you say, great entertainers from day one. Really, there's that 3-4 against Start Angers to open the season. Yeah. They beat Marseille 3-1. There was a 2-4 against Paris Saint-Germain in week 4, 3-3 against Bordeaux. There's some crazy. They won 4-0 away at Dijon. They beat Amiens at home 3-0. They lost a 4-0 against Rennes before the end of the turn of the year, but then they beat Angers at home 3-1. That 2-4, like we mentioned, against Nantes. Some really great games. The 2-2 even against Strasbourg last week was a pretty entertaining for where they came from behind as well.
Savernier's goal from the halfway line a couple of weeks ago as well was pretty special. So yeah,
they've absolutely been worth your book. So if they do end up sticking this one on Monday on TV somewhere in England, do try and find it, because Nîmes are almost guaranteed to bring you something kind of entertaining, and that at least comes to our predictions on the scoreline. Adam, what do you think the score will be?
I'm going to say 2-2.
Jez?
I was going to go for a Saint-Etienne win, but you've both convinced me. Oh, you've turned me. So I'm going to go 2-2 as well.
I'm going to go for the 3-2 Saint-Etienne win. I'm going to ruin the nightmare, the dream scenario for Nîmes, at least anyway. But it just feels like it'll be a great game, and with Saint-Etienne being a little bit more, shall we say, not as uptight as they maybe have been in previous seasons, it promises to be another exciting game for Nîmes to sink their teeth into. Just before we go tonight, we've not really going to preview it in depth, but the Coupe de Ligue final will be on your screens on Saturday night between Strasbourg and Guingamp. They're playing midweek to catch up with those fixtures, but it promises to be an interesting final, given the fact that finally Paris Saint-Germain aren't in it for one thing, so we're actually going to have a bit of a surprise runner regardless of who wins. But I'm going to want some predictions from both of you before this cup final. Jez, what do you think the score will be on Saturday night?
I'm finding it really hard on this one to decide as well. I think it's weird because Guingamp are kind of the form team of the two. They've only lost one of their last five, whereas Strasbourg actually have got a terrible recent record, and I think haven't won in about 8 matches or something. I don't think they haven't won since they qualified for the final in January actually. So on paper, on paper, it depends how you look at it. Strasbourg, I think you can clearly say have been the better team this season, but in recent weeks, Guingamp look more solid. But I think that missing both Coco and probably Dot as well are a big blow to Guingamp. I think Strasbourg have been sort of taking it a little bit easy, all because of this match, or because they want to be sort of fully fit and raring to go for this match. So I think Strasbourg will win it 2-1.
Adam, what do you think?
I'm on board with Jez though. I think 2-1 as well. I think sort of Strasbourg have been sort of saving themselves almost for this game. You know, for them to win the cup, given their fall from the top division in Ligue and nearly going out of business, and in the 4th and 5th tiers of French football, to fight their way back so rapidly and so sort of excellently. You know, they've done brilliantly since they've been promoted overall and got some really good results. And to win a cup, it'd be massive. So I kind of feel like they've had one eye on this game ever since this game was a thing. So I think that Strasbourg for me will run out winners.
Yeah, I was leaning towards Strasbourg, and then I had a moment of worry when Pierre-Paul at Birmingham, our guest on Monday night show, reminded us how good Guingamp had been getting through to the final and winning on penalties as well, which if it does go the distance, you start leaning maybe towards the Britain side. But I'm also going with Strasbourg. I think a 2-1 win and maybe a culmination of what has been a good season that's kind of petered out almost because of this final. So I think they're more desperate to win it than anyone could imagine. That's all for this week. My thanks to Adam, Jez, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the main show on Monday, but for now, enjoy your weekend of football.